Hello, and thanks for watching. In this course, I'll show you CFPB, or the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau's Financial Empowerment Toolkit. This course will give you a bird's eye view of what I'll be going over in my class for consumers starting next Thursday at 4 p.m. Please tell your consumers. Their course will involve practice with every single tool I'll be showing you, whereas you'll mostly just be given tools and pertinent information about each one. I'm condensing this information because A, I want to be considerate of your time, and B, you already use a lot of these strategies in your daily lives and in conversation with your consumers. These tools are fairly straightforward, so I won't go into too much depth about each one. However, I do want to highlight some tips, tricks, and features that will make these tools easy for you to use with your consumers. Let's get started. First, you'll need to know where to find these tools on your own. Each tool has been saved as an individual PDF on the Google Drive. You can print directly from the drive. The paper versions I've given you are simply for you to reference during our time together. Feel free to mark these up, because you can always print a blank version from the drive. Let me show you how to access them. First, you'll need to go to your drive. Then, select Shared with Me. Find the folder named Atlantis Community, Inc. Locate the folder, Representative Payee, then open the folder called Financial Empowerment Toolkit. All tools are arranged by the module they're from in the Your Money, Your Goals curriculum, then by tool number. Today we'll be previewing the tools in modules 1 and 2. Since you're getting the abbreviated version, I thought I'd still fill you in on what we'll be going into more depth on in the consumer version of Your Money, Your Goals. First, we'll be doing a lot of reflecting on what kind of futures we might want to build. As well, we'll be brainstorming things that will cost us money, like moving, marriage, children, accidents, parties, etc. And finally, we'll discuss the benefits of planning ahead. In short, we'll come to the realization that even a little planning will make for a more optimistic future. And here's where the rubber meets the road. Module 1, Tool 1, the Goal Setting Tool. This tool is very much a conversation piece and will probably take a bit of time for you and your consumer to complete. The first step of this tool should be used for brainstorming. Generate as many ideas as you can. Nothing is off limits, and the more the better. Remind your consumer that they can come back to this in the future to pick new goals. No energy spent on this page is wasted. In my example, this consumer has listed quite a few goals, including paying off credit cards, buying a car, and applying for a mortgage. The chart splits goals between short-term, achievable in 6 months or less, and long-term, achievable in more than 6 months. Step 2 asks your consumer to pick 1 or 2 goals from step 1 and to workshop it until it is SMART. There is no difference in breaking down long and short-term goals, so I'm only going to talk about one example here. My example consumer has decided to work on her pet problems first. We have to add some language to make this a SMART goal. First, we added the amounts that needed to be saved to make it specific. The vet visit itself is how we will measure the success of this goal. Based on my fake consumer's finances, she will certainly be able to save $120 by setting aside $20 a month for 6 months. It is relevant to my consumer because she must take her dogs to the vet in order to be able to keep them in her apartment. Our goal is time-bound to the end of the year. Once we've double-checked that our goal is SMART, we're ready to talk about action steps. The tool reminds you to consider what resources will be needed, including information, tools, assistance, transportation, etc. This will be an important talking point for you to spend some time on with your consumer. My example consumer and I discussed how we can approach her goal of getting both of her dogs to the vet. She knows that setting funds aside is the most important step, but when she wanted to list that one first, I asked her what has kept her from accomplishing this sooner. She told me that she doesn't do a good job saving money because she tends to use up everything that's in her bank account. So we discussed whether or not opening a savings account might help. She agreed, so we put that as a needed resource. She'll visit the bank and open an account within the next few weeks. Next, she plans to save money a little bit at a time so as not to break the bank. Every paycheck she gets, she'll take $20 to the bank and deposit it to her savings. Finally, she will need to schedule an appointment with the vet so she can hold herself accountable for following through. We've listed the needed resources and set a date for the completion of this step as well. Please forgive the redundancy of step 4. This is really more for the consumer than anything else. You'll rewrite the goal one last time with your consumer, determine the amount to be saved, decide on a time frame, and then do the math. You should remind your consumer to reference this document as often as they work on their goal. Module 1, Tool 2 is much less intensive. The purpose of this tool is to glance ahead with your consumer and identify potential potholes in the road of life. The first page lists 4 steps to planning ahead. As you go through each step with your consumer, document the events you talk about on the second page. Each of the 4 steps has a corresponding column on page 2 and 3. The rows go from soon, within 1 year, to the distant future, more than 20 years from now. If your consumer seems stuck, you can help them by asking things like, do you think you'll live in the same place forever? Will you drive the same car forever? Is there anything special you might like to do in the near or distant future, like vacations or an event? 2 interesting features of this tool are the Ways to Pay and the Ways to Cut Expenses columns. Ways to Pay allows a space for the consumer to consider whether they will find funds to make things happen. If a loan is the only answer for every upcoming purchase, it may be time to think about putting money aside to save up for down payments. This leads nicely to the Ways to Cut Expenses column. The tool urges the consumer to be crafty with resources to make life events and large purchases more affordable. For example, a consumer may be aware that their currently 10-year-old daughter deserves the world's most bangin' quinceañera. If we're planning ahead, we may be able to consider ways to shift things around so a $5,000 quinceañera feels like a $15,000 quinceañera, like finding a cool but cheap or free venue, or collaborating with friends to provide good food without paying for a catering service. The combination of planning ahead and starting a savings can greatly reduce the financial burden and stress of big life events. Module 1, Tool 3 is another conversation piece. It really is just a list of topics for the consumer to consider prior to walking into a dealership. Getting prepared by working on the credit score to get the best rate for a loan, learning how to negotiate the terms of a loan, understanding the difference between long and short-term auto loans. This tool includes a breakdown of how much interest will be paid based on the term of the loan, as well as advice on how to review and sign the contract. The final page warns your consumer to think carefully before co-signing a loan for a friend or family member, because they may become financially responsible for someone else's loan, which could become extremely jeopardizing. The link at the bottom has a lot of great info, ranging from definitions of basic terms to how to solve problems one might encounter when starting or living with an auto loan. This tool can be used as an in-person discussion guide or as a resource for your consumer to revisit on their own as they take steps toward purchasing a vehicle. Module 2 takes the idea of goal setting and expands it to saving intentionally for the unknown. In this class, consumers discuss different options for places to store money. the risks and benefits of different ways for paying for emergencies, and the ramifications of saving while receiving benefits. The tools in this unit are aimed at convincing consumers that the fly by the seat of your pants method of financial planning is not effective and is actually quite costly. Module 2, Tool 1, walks the consumer through a series of questions intended to lead the consumer to decide that saving for emergencies will be a worthwhile endeavor. The first page is just an introduction to these two surveys. The real fun begins on page 2 with the question, is an emergency fund right for you? If the consumer answers no to any of these 4 questions, that are all very similar about having money in savings, you're encouraged to ask the next set of questions in reference to any of the 4 previous questions. So if someone answered no to having funds set aside for semi-annual expenses like vehicle registration, this next set of questions is then in relation to paying for registration. If you look closely, you'll notice that every option on the survey is not a good way to pay for anything, really. Anyone who says it all just seems to work out is either bizarrely lucky or makes enough money that they may not need our help. Every option after that has negative consequences. Not paying for other bills can affect credit scores, incur fees, or interrupt vital services. Payday loans and pawn shops are predatory and should be avoided at all costs. This is a unit unto itself later in the course. Ideally, after going over those 2 questions with your consumer, they'll say, golly, I should really start putting money aside just in case. And then you'll move on to the next page to start making a plan, which you may have already done with Module 1, Tool 1, Goal Setting Tool. If it makes sense, you can use this tool instead, as it breaks the savings plan into months rather than weeks. I recommend that you and your consumer craft the savings plan around either the time frame or the amounts needed to be saved. Generally, one will be more relevant than the other based on the consumer's needs. Once you have an amount or time frame picked out, you can move through the worksheet as usual. The example consumer here decided that her goal was to save $1,000 for emergencies. Based on her income, she felt that $100 a month seemed like a reasonable amount to put aside. After discussing her spending habits, we realized that she doesn't need Comcast's expensive sports package or have to take the kids out for Burger King every single night of the week, but instead, she'll save that money. Apparently, she's been handling only cash up to this point, so opening a savings account at a bank or credit union will make it harder for her to accidentally spend her savings. If you're feeling brave, you're welcome to use my handy-dandy budget calculator with your consumer. Unlike the Your Money, Your Goals tool, my calculator allows you to modify the percentage saved from each month's income and will automatically adjust the suggested monthly and weekly spending amounts. Keep an eye on the amounts in those cells as I adjust the monthly savings contribution from 5 to 10%. In order for this to work, though, your consumer will have to fill you in on all income and expenses first. It's worth noting here that the algorithm for the weekly spending amount factors in months with more than 4 weeks. So if the consumer sticks to that amount as their fund money, they should never run out of funds. This calculator is found in the same location on the drive as the Your Money, Your Goals tools. Module 2, Tool 2, begins by providing some basic information about asset limits. The rest of this tool is fairly straightforward. The consumer can look for the benefits they receive and see the corresponding asset limits. Beware though, this information is from 2016 and may have since changed. When in doubt, follow the links listed on pages 2 through 4 to see if the asset limits have changed. This tool will be extremely helpful when working with consumers on financial goals that require a large chunk of money. If the amount that needs to be saved would put the consumer over their asset limit, it may be necessary for the consumer to start looking into a supplementary needs trust through an organization like ABLE or CFPD, the Colorado Fund for People with Disabilities. This topic is covered in a future module. Module 2, Tool 3 should be used as a resource sheet. Depending on the consumer's needs, you could review this information with them, or you can simply print this off and give it to your consumer to read and answer at their convenience. I would highlight the risks and benefits columns. You can use these to steer consumers away from dangerous methods of saving, like hoarding cash in the home or saving it with a friend. Note that at the bottom of the second page, there is a spot for the consumer to write down which option they like best. Module 2, Tool 4, defines the Earned Income Tax Credit, then shows a table of the income limits and the maximum tax credit. Be sure to visit the website listed for updated information on income limits. The last page of this tool gives information on how to use BIBIS to pay less taxes. This tool will really come in handy between the months of January and April, when everyone in America suddenly becomes interested in tax policy. Congratulations! You've watched this presentation to its natural conclusion. Please remember that feedback and questions are always welcome.